Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name's Nicole and this is Darvanalee Designs Studio, and today we are here for a trash and treasure, so let's get started. Everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with me while I turn something from trash into treasure. So we talked about this on the channel, I think on a live stream where I was figuring out ways to use the leftovers from a stitch and flip. So I had a lot in a particular colorway which was from the border, and the quilt that I'm talking about is Among the Stars again. Okay, and so I had done a lot of stitch and flip in that, and I ended up with quite a bundle. And so basically I put my thinking cap on. I thought, what am I going to make with it? At first I thought I was going to make a cushion, then I thought maybe a little bedside topper, a table topper, and then I thought, you know what, I need a wall hanging for when I am using this quilt. So I've designed a mini quilt. A lovely subscriber sent me a PDF with half square triangle layouts. So I took 9 of those. I've used all the red and white, and that's why I'm calling it the Candy Cane mini quilt. And this will get a red binding on it, and I'm going to quilt it on the long arm machine when I quilt the Among the Stars quilt, and so I will have the same design on that. So I have just been slowly doing this over the last few days. So I have got a whole heap of video, the snippets that I've got, and I also go into why I ended up using the sashing between it and any difficulties that I had. But I do hope that you enjoy the video, so let's get into it. Okay, so first things that we had to do was I needed to get all of my stitch and flip pieces and start sewing them together. So here it looks like I'm making a nice little string of bunting. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I haven't really played around with them. Basically I just had a pile and I just started sewing and just chain piecing those through, and I ended up with enough to do about 9 blocks, I think I calculated, and basically, as you'll see a little bit further on in the video, we do have a PDF that Rose, the subscriber, sent through to me, and she found it on the internet. I've subsequently found the link, and so you will be able to use that for some of the layouts. Now, there was a lot. This took me probably about half an hour with all of them, because I not only did the red ones, which were from the border, I also did the ones from the blocks as well. So we had a mixture of red and white. We had some green with a little bit of holly on it. We had some grey ones. We had one that looked very similar to a cross stitch. So I've had to stitch all of those together. Also, another tip is to use up your bobbins that are almost nearly empty, and then that way you can empty up some bobbins, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to snip these apart now. Now, a little tip. I have these came in a sew sampler box, I think. These are little spring-loaded ones. When you've got this much stuff to snip apart, it can get your hands can get quite tired. So just having something that you can just push together rather than using your thumbs and your fingers like this, I find these are really good. I don't often use them on the videos because I'm not doing bulk snipping apart, but you can see they just sit nicely in your hand. They're great for snips. Like, you can get lots like all different colors of these and whatnot, so they've got really good snips, and I'll leave a link down below where you can get some. They are perfect for when you're doing trash to treasure stuff, or bonus blocks when you're doing a lot. Now you can see here I've probably got in excess of 50 half square triangles to snip apart. So basically what I'm trying to do, there's one that's escaped, what I'm trying to do is just limit the fatigue on my hands. And yeah, so I'm going to snip these apart, and then unfortunately we have no really other alternative but to use our rotary cutter. And I just get myself comfortable, I grab myself a cup of tea, grab out my rulers, and then I've got this little mat here because they're little. I can just, and I've got like some other different size mats as well that I can just sit up on my bench, and as you can see, I can just relax, drink my cup of tea. Next, we're moving on to pressing, and I'm just using a little hand press before I press it with the iron. It just makes life a little bit easy. And there is a lot to press. As you can see, there is a lot. Now that all the pressing is out of the way, thank goodness for that, next is the arduous task of squaring all of these half square triangles up. Now, I measured most of them, which you didn't see on camera, and they were coming in just under 2 inches. So I ended up squaring these up to 1.5 inches. And this took me a little while to do, probably about an hour and a half to almost 2 hours to get it all done. But you can see here that I was swapping between rulers. I was just trying to find a really comfortable ruler. I ended up going back to my Omni Grid one because it was a little bit smaller than my 6.5. I think this one is a 5-inch ruler, 5.5-inch ruler, and it's just easier to handle when I'm doing something this small. But as I said, this took about 2 hours to do, and you can see there I'm keeping all my scraps. I've got another project in mind, so I'm going to use that as stuffing. So it is going to be very interesting to see what I can get out of all of the fabric that we've had left over. All right, so that was a big task. Got it all done in the end, and as you can see, how pretty are these? So there is quite a number of the red and white ones, and as I was doing this, I was thinking that that was probably what I was going to go with. They're so pretty. I love these fabrics. Um, it took a while, but it's well worth it, I think. So as you can see here, I have started laying out the blocks. Just to save a little bit of time, I was I sewed them off camera, and you'll see them shortly when we get to the layout. As I said earlier, a subscriber, Rose, sent me that PDF that she found online. And so I'm just picking and choosing. There's 25 to choose from. So I'm just picking and choosing some of the ones that I want to use. Now, I decided to go with just the red and white. And you can just see there at the top of the screen near the ironing pad there's some more red and white there. I had enough to do, which I go into a little bit further. I had enough to do the spot, and I needed one extra one, and there was just enough to do another one of these blocks with that red and white floral. So I was pretty happy to be able to get 9 blocks in the red and white colorway. I sort of played around a little bit. and then I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, but I ended up just going with these ones. And as I was snipping them apart, there was a couple that had not been stitched together, and so I was just I got all them, and you've just seen them go there on the ironing pad. Now they had not been stitched together because I'd ran out of bobbin, didn't realise, missed them and whatnot, but there was enough to do another block in that colorway, so I had 9 altogether. At first I didn't think I had enough, but I did, and I left all of the green out, and I go into that a little bit further as we go on. And you can see there I'm trying to think, shall I do it, shall I not, I don't know. And then I just started marking them off, but I love the blocks that I chose. And yeah, we'll move on to the next step. And I have been busy off camera making some blocks, and you will get to see the B-roll for that. I have one left, and I'm going to just basically lay that out and sew that together. And then I've got some of these sashing strips that were left over that I accidentally cut the wrong size, and they just happen to be the perfect size. They're 2.5 inches by I think about 4 3/4. So they just happen to be the perfect size for the blocks, so I'm going to use them as a sashing. And I've also got some white 2.5 inch strips left from making the borders for the Among the Stars quilt. So what I figured, as I said, I've already made a whole heap of these off camera, and as you can see we've got some here. They're not perfect by any means, but they're going to make a cute little wall hanging. I decided to go with a wall hanging to hang up on the wall when I use the quilt, and so a mini quilt essentially. And basically I'm calling it Candy House or Candy Cane House, maybe, I don't know, the Candy Cane quilt. But this form is I found the link for it, and a lovely subscriber sent it to me, but it didn't have any information on it, so I had to go a bit searching for it. I found the original link for it, so I will link that up down below, and it's got 25 layouts for half square triangles, and you can do this for any size half square triangles. So basically now when you ever make a quilt and you've got some extra bits and pieces that are left over, you can sew them into half square triangles, and you essentially can make yourself another quilt, a wall hanging, mini quilt, table runner, whatever you want to do. Now, I ended up just going with the red and white. I didn't use any of the grey or green, so I've still got these left over, but I'm going to leave them and wait until I have done some more blocks out of the fabric that I've got left over, and I'll probably make something else to go with it, because I'm making another quilt with what I've got left over, and I'm just going to use a different white. But that's okay, because it'll just be a tone on tone. I'll probably endeavour to find a white dot spot, and then I can use that. So I'm going to have to buy some more fabric because I cut the white fabric wrong. So I'm thinking that I might be able to get another single bed quilt out of it, which means that I'm going to have left over. I'm going to see how many of the blocks I can get out of that, because essentially I think we can get 2 quilts out of it, most definitely. As I said, I will probably have to add some more white into it for sure. I did find a tone on tone that in my drawer, but I don't know if I've got enough there. So far I have made 8 of the just red and white blocks, and is that right? No, 7 of the red and white blocks. 1 of this, because I only had enough to make this, I only had 16 left. Each of these blocks has 16 in it. This is all from the border of the Among the Stars quilt. So I have already made those, and I've got another 16 left, and I'm going to make another one. So I've just sort of gone around, and I'm debating whether to make this one or this one, and I'm thinking I'm going to go with this one. A little bit easier, and then we're going to add some sashing to it, put the final thing together, add a border around it, and then I will just do a red binding. And I do have some of this red fabric left, so I'm thinking that I'm just going to use that red fabric. All right, so some of the other things that you're going to need today, and as I said, this link is down below, so you can make a quilt for yourself, you can make one the same. I will endeavour to put a screenshot at the end of this video of the blocks that I made from it. So if you want to make one the same, then you've got that. All right, so you'll maybe need a quick unpick because I did use it several times. As I said, the blocks are not perfect by any means, but I still love it, and overall it's going to look amazing. You're going to need some sashing strips. Of course, that will depend on what size your blocks are, so I'm not going to give any sizes for that. You're going to need a rotary cutter. You're going to need a ruler to square up, some thread snips, You don't really need a pencil. That was just there from me doing some squiggling down notes. And you're going to need some pins. The clapper does come in handy for when you're working with small blocks. Now, I ended up, because I just sort of done this on a whim, I didn't press my seams open like I normally would, and I would highly recommend you reducing your stitch length and actually pressing your seams open. It just will make it so much easier to get through because you're working with smaller amounts. It'll just sit a little bit better. If I was doing it again, I would probably press my seams open. I definitely would press my seams open, not probably, definitely. All right, so let's move some of this stuff out of the way and get into this last block and start assembling, do the layout and start assembling. Now, as I said, there are 16 in each block, so it is essentially a 16 patch, and we're working with tiny little pieces. And these pieces ended up being now these were out of 12-inch blocks, and these were the stitch and flip from the border. They were 6.5 by 12.5 they ended up being, but we had all the little strips and everything. So this is just the stitch and flip off the top. Now, even the grey ones, they were just under the 2-inch mark. So after I squared them up, because some of them are a little bit skew-if, I basically just squared them up to 1.5 inches. Now, not everybody likes working with small blocks, but I don't mind doing it, and I do struggle. I will admit I do struggle with working with small pieces. I'm still learning. I've always made big blocks and all that sort of stuff, so there's a little bit more room for error, where with the small one you don't have as much room for error. But I'm still practicing, and that's why I thought that this would be a great way to work on some of those smaller blocks. Most of the time when I do small blocks, I've done it by hand, so that's why I struggle, and my machine is not great for small things either. So basically now all I'm going to do is just chain piece these through and assemble the block. And I keep the needle in the down position. I find that that helps. And a couple of tips and tricks: make sure that when you start something, when you're working with small blocks, that you start with a fresh needle, and that because the sharper it is, the easier it is it's going to be to go through the seams that you have. Make sure that all your seams are pressed open, because I did not press mine open and I really struggled to get them to lay flat and straight. You can see here I am trying to get them to sit, and you can see they've got a little bit of a kick, so you've got to be very mindful of that, and make sure that you press each one. Now, some of the blocks that I did lend themselves to doing a 4-patch, and they went together okay, although I still had some problems because I didn't press my seams open. I think that that is the key here. As I said earlier, I don't do a lot of small blocks, so this is all still new, to like a learning curve for me. But you can see here that it goes together pretty quick. This particular one went together pretty quick. Some of the other ones are a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. You want to give it a really good press, and then basically I'm just trimming off, not really any fabric here, I'm just trimming off all the long threads. And now I'm moving on to laying it out. Now, I already had some sort of idea how I wanted it. I've got that red and white one there in the center, and then I'm going to add sashing to the centerpieces. Yeah, I didn't worry about laying it all out and all that sort of stuff, so it was a very basic layout. So the center blocks, I just pinned where the sashing was going to go, and then I'm just chain piecing that through, and then I will press those seams the appropriate ways they need to go. So my when I put the sashing on, it'll just sit nice and flat. So basically here, these are 2.5 inches wide, and my blocks were about 4 and 3/4, just about. They ended up measuring 4 1/4 when they were finished in the quilt. And here you can see I'm just adding the next blocks on. Again, just chain piecing. This part of the quilt went together very quickly. I'm so glad that I ended up doing this, because most people throw those stitch and flips out. But as you can see, we've got a mini quilt. out of this, and while it's not perfect, it's going to look great up on the wall. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add our top border and also our sashing fabric between each row, and also our bottom one. And so you can see here I've just grabbed a 2.5-inch strip, and this was the width of the fabric, and so basically I just ended up chopping that little bit off. And if you take a width of the fabric in these particular sizes, you could just chop it in half and you ended up with a strip that was long enough to cover them, and also for the side borders as well, after I'd finished putting them all in. It went together really well. At this point where I've got my sashing pieces, you can see I'm putting some pins in there. Now I was lining up my seams with the one that had already been done on the bottom one, just to give it so it looked a little bit like it ran properly, that it wasn't skewiff or anything like that. Then I went to the bottom one and I put the 2 rows onto that of sashing, so that's the top border, the bottom border, and the next sashing. And then I will just add that to, it's just easier to do that than try and wrestle with the whole quilt. I was just trimming it off, and then I will just add those on. And again, I'm lining up those vertical sashings to make sure that they're lining up, just so when I look at it, or when anybody else looks at it, it looks like that they're all running in a row, and then I've taken a little bit of care with that. I'm going to give it a quick press here, and then I'm going to add on my side borders, and then basically it is done. And again, as I said, I just got 1 strip and I cut it in half, and that was enough to go down the side. So you only need 3 strips of with the fabric of whatever your chosen sashing is. And you can just see there I was just trimming it off so I've got a nice straight edge. Now I did lose some points on some of my blocks, but as I said, I am fairly new to making very small blocks. It's not something that I do often. If I do make small blocks, I either do them by hand or I do foundation paper piecing, where there's little room for, there's generally no error. You don't lose points or anything like that because it's foundation paper piecing. I'm then just trimmed it off and made sure it was even all the way around, and then I've just given it a really good press, and I've gone over it a couple of times, making sure that everything is laying flat. I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I'm glad that I didn't throw the pieces out, and I hope that this inspires you to keep your scraps as well and turn them into something wonderful. And as you can see, here is the finished quilt on my neighbour's lawn again. And that seems to be a bit of a theme. I'm like, morning Les, just using your lawn again. But anyway, as you can see, it is turned out absolutely beautiful. And here are some of the pictures of the close-up. I am really happy with how it turned out, and I look forward to seeing some of the pictures that you do from your scraps over in the Facebook group. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really do appreciate you being here, and I do hope that you enjoyed making the candy cane mini quilt. I'm going to stick with that name. I love how this turned out. Like I said in the video, I did have a few problems, but that's because I'm still learning to work with small pieces and get my, my rhythm on my sewing machine. But I just love how this would have been, all this fabric would have been thrown away, and I've managed to make a lovely mini quilt which is going to look beautiful on my wall once it's done. And as I said, I am going to have a red binding on that, so it'll be all cohesive, and I'm going to quilt it exactly the same way as I did with the Among the Stars quilt. But if you like this video today, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you've made it this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because my analytics tell me that most of you have not yet done that. But make sure you do hit it, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.